even more. But Dr. Price, the original charge to Mr. Stotzing was to say we were going to go ahead and really put $700,000 back into the general fund, or from the general fund into extracurriculars in order to pay our coaches. And what would that do to the fee?
I asked him to run a model.
Right, I understand. What the board now, I believe, is saying is that we still believe we have to come up with a longer-term solution to this issue, which is not having our coaches volunteer, but where we are today is where we were back in fall. And I think until we come up with this more permanent solution as to where the priorities lie, or the community wishes to actually step to the plate in March, if that's the desire of the board to put another issue on the ballot, we've got to prioritize that 1.5 over the next couple months. Having said that, I don't know that my position as a board member has changed as it relates to extracurriculars, which simply is it has to be revenue neutral in the short term, which I will admit, one, is not the long-term solution, and two, I, as well as I will reiterate what Mrs. McNeil said, I also value extracurriculars, and we need to find a way to figure out where that priority lies within this community. But right now, the decision has to be made, what are we going to do for Thursday? And what I hear the board saying is we're willing to move $200,000 from the general fund into extracurriculars to try to reduce the participation fee, but we're not at this point willing to reinstate extracurriculars, meaning we're going to retroactively pay advisors and coaches.
Can I make one comment about that? The survey showed high priority for academics, medium priority for extracurriculars. Are we, by taking $200,000 and putting it into extracurriculars, going against what this community really wants us to put that money into?
I share that concern because, and I would support reducing the fee to some level that makes it so that more of our students are going to be able to come up with that fee. I don't know what that number is. As Dr. Price, as you said, $225 for some people is out of reach. It's more in reach than $325. I don't know what that number is, but I hesitate to say if the whole cost is $289 without the cost of the coaches. I'm understanding that, and it's not the long-term solution. But I'm not saying take 200 and see what that brings the fee down to. I want to look at it the other way and say, what's a reasonable fee and how much money would it take? I don't want to take carte blanche $200,000 to put into athletics when I don't know where that's coming from right now, because we still have to wait to hear how much it's going to cost us to bring back the teachers we need to go back to a full day. I don't want to put that 200 to athletics without knowing what I'm taking it from. And as Dr. McClure says, extracurriculars was not as high a priority as on that survey as the others. It was a concern of the community, but it wasn't as high. So I don't think we should be short-circuiting that process. But I mean, I would be in support of taking some amount of money from the general fund to reduce that fee to something that is more attainable by more students in the community.
Can I take that a step further? I like the idea of reversing the question. Take it a step further, and in an effort to get stability for this year, see what it would be for spring sports too. So families can be planning ahead, and we can maintain a program into spring.
Well, I think what I would recommend that whatever that fee is, because it's based on a total dollar amount, what Mr. Stotzing just read, that if we establish it at $225, that there's actually going to be some reimbursements made to students from the fall to make up that difference. Correct. And it would be $225 going forward for the spring as well as winter, because we're dealing with whole numbers for the whole year there.
We're not splitting them out between fall, winter, and spring.
And again, there are a number of assumptions that we're going through to do that, and we can certainly model, and I can give you a number based upon where we're at if that's what the board so desires. if 200,000 is the number, we can plug that in and give you.
Or 225 is the fee. That's the.
So if you make 225 the fee, you'd have to calculate what
has to come out of the general fund.
Right, $200,000 would result if all of the coaches donate from fall all the way through at this point in time, using that as an assumption, would generate a high school GMC sports activity of $101.
With 200 coming out of the general fund.
200 with...
well, considering the 5-4-3 club and all the stuff that's...
all the stuff that's already been in place, okay. Plus removing $200,000 from the general fund and coaches volunteer. That's a key piece.
Right, which...
and we're reducing those fees down. So we can come up with a number. If you come up with a number that is tolerable, then we can certainly build that in as an assumption.
What amount is taken from the general fund if the fee is $225?
I don't know that he can give you that answer that quickly,
okay.
But play with some numbers you can.
Well,
but understand the message we're sending to the teachers in the union, that we're going to lower the fee for the students. And I don't know what the union's going to say when we say none of that money is going to even defray any of the costs for the coaches. So we have to remember that's a message that we're sending.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is we can't pay the coaches partially because of contract and also because of Fair Labor Standard laws. We either have to pay the coaches their full, regular, supplemental for coaching that sport, or nothing.
Unless you
Am I wrong about that?
You probably could get a non-binding memorandum of understanding for this year to pay partial. I can't speak for the union, but if that's what the board's desire was, I would approach them to ask if that were acceptable. They may say no. They may say you either pay us or you don't.
I would hope that the coaches would understand that the message is we are trying to work through these issues.
Absolutely.
And we, in no way, shape, or form, believe that this is the long-term solution for extracurricular activities in Middletown City School System. That our coaches must volunteer in order for us to put on athletics. I think at some point, again, long-term, the board has to decide, the community has to decide where do the priorities lie. And if we can come to a consensus that those include extracurriculars, then we have to find a way to fund them, either through other cuts or through new money. And so the message I think that I hope people understand is we are trying to work through a short-term issue to get to a long-term solution. And again, we started down this path the beginning of this school year with it must be revenue neutral, and because of the willingness and the advisors and the coaches to forego their supplemental contracts, we were able to get this down to something reasonable for the fall activity to go. We're trying to do the same thing for winter, and we're trying to do the same thing.
I will tell you that we've already lost some coaches because they did it for the fall, but they just can't afford it. They have to go out and find other ways to supplement their income, and they're just not going to do it.
Given the assumptions for that coaches volunteer, and we want to get to approximately a 225 number, that would take $90,000 from the general fund at this point in time, given those assumptions, to make that occur.
And if you didn't take any out, it would be 325.
Yeah, nothing's changed.
If coaches
Nothing's
kept
changed.
volunteering.
Yes, if coaches volunteer.
$289,000. Is that the difference between the 450 and the 325, or is that from 0 to 325?
I did not.
Participation fee is $50?
Correct.
That's what I was asking, is that $289,000 fee?
Includes
the difference, or did it include the original 50 to begin with?
Well, $9,000 was simply the total cost of athletics, total cost of extracurriculars, minus the salaries of the individual coaches.
The supplemental contracts.
So if, in other words, salary supplemental contracts was $611,000, and we had to make the rest of that $900,000 up, with the fees, and that was $289,000.
So it does include the 50 then? Right. Does include the $50 that students...
Well, no, no, technically, it didn't include anything. I mean,
The $50 would go to offset that.
The $50 would go to offset that 289.
Right.
Yeah.
In order to completely offset it, it needed to go to the 325. So.
Technically, we didn't, in the past, didn't collect much of it, so it really didn't offset too much.
Yeah. Any other questions from
Those times have changed, though.
questions or comments?
I'd like Dr. Price to explore with the union some options with coaching staff. As you say, we don't know at this point.
Well, you mean options that some additional money, besides lowering the fee, additional money would go to pay partial coaching supplementals? Because that'll take additional money out of the general fund then.
Well, just so we know some options for future.
I mean, that's a tough one. Because I can give different options, and you want me to pay 25% of the supplementals, 50% of the supplementals, because all of that has a different number then.
You know, again, I really think that...
And we said coaches wouldn't get paid unless we made a statement, the board made a statement that said coaches would not be paid unless both issues passed.
I think cost neutral is cost neutral. I keep going back to that. That was what we said, and now all of a sudden we're dipping into the till, and that's not cost neutral anymore.
But at the last board meeting, the board did show an interest in perhaps helping with the student fees.
Compromise.
Well, I
And
understand that.
again, I think where Dr. Price and Mr. Stotzing are coming from is that we've been through what will soon to be a first semester with operating on a reduced budget, which has resulted in some savings that now,
Correct.
given the fact that we have at least gotten the renewal back, there is some...
And in addition to that, we have the administrative pay freeze that has resulted in a little over $100,000 worth of savings as well.
That will not change.
That will not change. This year.
Right.
So there's that.
Hopefully.
The other factor is we need to come up with $1.5 million worth of savings, from the $5.5 million, based upon the forecast.
Right. For 3 years.
Correct, and that phase...
For 3 years.
That's 7, and remember that we're the calendar year, from the cash flow savings, it's $750,000 initially, and then 1.5 all the way out through because of the half-year collection. So you've got those two factors that are playing into the overall forecast. So cash does permit you to make some choices.
And again, I think what Dr. Price... Go ahead.
So in other words, the $200,000 may be part of the savings that exists as a result of the, savings as the result of the freeze that is occurring.
Well, that and the fact that you don't have, again, I think what we're trying to say is how many teachers and administrators and whatnot do we not hire, or do we basically whiff because of the fact that we had not been able to get the new money and the renewal.
Right, it's 110 positions. It represents about $303,500,000. We also reduced hours in a number of areas for an additional $91,000. What we're looking at is, at this point in time, depending upon how long this goes out, that number changes. So when we bring a part back, that's going to reduce how much it is. But we've essentially saved from September, which is when the new payroll begins, to today, what those payrolls are. That's roughly 7 pays that has reduced the amount of outflow that has occurred during that time frame. One thing that does mitigate that is the cost for unemployment for several of those teachers. We did not, teachers, administrators, custodians, everybody, that would reduce that. So I would say that conservative estimate would be, $750,000 roughly would be conservative.
It would have normally been expended.
That has not been, but yes.
But is being held there because the goal of the board is to reinstate 100% of the items that were cut if both issues pass.
I would be in favor of taking $90,000 to reduce the winter, and I guess to reduce the sports fees. We said before that if we made a change, it would be retroactive. to reduce the fees to $225 on it, as a temporary solution. I agree that we can't go back on, the coaches volunteered and we had to have both levies passed to have the funds to fully pay the coaches. And we very much appreciate what the coaches are doing in volunteering, but nothing has changed that would merit using that $700,000 to pay the coaches at this point. Now, long term, it's not going to work. We can't. The coaches are not going to volunteer year after year after year. So, long term, we've got to come up with a solution how we're going to save $1.5 million. And if we want to have extracurricular program, we're going to have to
something else has
do
to go.
something. I just want to say, right now, I am not in favor of going back to the voters in March for money again. I feel like people are just beat up and tired with levies, and we've given people 3 times to tell us what they support, and this last time it was split, there was a choice, and I think we have to take the message that we support your continued level of funding, but we're not giving you new money, and we as a board have to figure out how we do that. What gets cut, what stays, and I mean, I could be convinced otherwise, but right now that is my feeling.
And we need to make it clear, the board, I think, to the community, that the fee is going to be $225 in the spring, with the understanding that it can only be $225 if coaches volunteer. And I don't think it's going to happen. I think you're going to jeopardize extracurricular activities in this district for the spring forward.
So you say,
unless there is a commitment to do something to take it out of the general fund and make other cuts in other areas. I mean, just to put it plain, it has to be that plain and understandable to the community right now that that's where we are, that no matter how good we are at finding cuts in other areas, it's not going to be enough to make up